Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are watching across the world. I feel like it's the Truman Show, and I've saying to the start of and every other scene. So it gives me great pleasure, really, to welcome our esteemed panelists for the food sustainability and nutrition session, an area that's vital, actually, within climate change and within targeting our support for the UN SDGs. And really, I wanted to kick off before introducing our panelists, just with a few stats, which may be of interest to the audience watching. We are in a global health crisis. I think we can all agree here. It's quite strange, and the paradox whereby a quarter of children under the age of 5 are malnourished, yet 40% of the world is obese. So I just wanted to start off with those two facts. And we are struggling in terms of diet in the Western world and the developed market. And I really want to tackle a host of questions. And before I introduce our panelists, I just want to encourage the audience who are watching on Swapcard, do get involved with some questions. We have some great speakers here across different walks of life, and I really recommend being as active as possible. Don't shy away from the screen, get involved. And as we speak, our final panelist, Alexandra Morrow, has just joined us. But without further ado, thank you all for joining us. We have on the line with us Patrick Briot from the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, who's the head of impact investing. We have Ali Morrow, who's a founder at Astonor Ventures. Maya Itkonen, who's the chief innovation officer and founder at Golden Green Foods. And last but not least, Seth Tibbett, who's the founder of Tofurky, who has joined us at the nice early hour at 5:30 in the morning. So I think, first off, a virtual round of applause for Seth for the commitment shown. I'd like to start off if everyone could introduce themselves individually. Patrick, you are the closest to me on the screen, so why don't you kick us off with a brief intro about yourself?
Happy to. Thank you. And great to be with you all today. Maybe I'll start off by saying I am part of the unconverted. I think I had a big proper burger last night, and so I'm actually eager to learn, as well as hopefully to contribute a little bit. My role at Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors is essentially helping asset owners shift their portfolio to align to their values, and if they're an organization, into their mission. And so we have a good stream of work with those who are interested in sustainable foods and even broader in the climate question. I'm really excited to be here to again add a bit and learn as well.
Thank you, Pat. Ali, brief intro about yourself, please.
Sure, happy to. Nice to see everybody and glad to be here as well. I'm Ali from Astonor Ventures. We are a European venture firm exclusively focused on agriculture and food and the transition to a more regenerative food system. So we invest across the spectrum. We refer to it as investing from soil to gut. We are not vegan investors. We do believe animals have a role in the food system, but one that is healthy, nourishing, and regenerative, and of course, delicious. So looking forward to learning from everyone too.
I like the phrase investing soil to gut, Ali. It's a nice line. Maya, for joining us from Helsinki, please do kick us off.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Maya Itkonen. I'm the founder of the Golden Green Foods. Golden Green was founded 5 years ago with the vision that we really want to create better plant-based meat alternatives. We started with the Nordic superfood oats. Nobody really has been working with oats on this field. If you think about that, the dairy alternatives made of oats are quite common already, but like meat alternatives, not so common. So our founding team had like a really great expertise of this topic, and therefore we were able to create our first product called pulled oats. It's a really nice pulled product that has about 30% of protein, and it's a kind of like a perfect protein composition made of oats, but also faba beans, yellow pea, oil, and salt. And yes, the company is very much like a tech focused, so we actually have a quite nice patent portfolio already, and we are constantly developing new innovative technologies and like lots of new stuff in the pipelines, all plant protein meat alternatives, but some role oats always has in there. Our products are currently available in about 15 markets in Western Europe and USA, and also some in Asian markets. Yes, and I'm working as the Chief Innovation Officer here at the Golden Green.
Lovely, thanks, Maya. Seth, you've been working within plant-based alternatives for 40 years now. Why don't you give us a brief story, and particularly about your start?
Yeah, sure. So, yep, Seth Tibbett here, and I am the founder and chairman of the Tofurky Company. And I started professionally in 1980, investing $2,500 of my own money to make tempeh, which was the first product that the company made. And I did that for 15 years before pivoting to Tofurky, which has become a household name in the United States. And we manufacture all our products out of Hood River, Oregon, which is in the northwest of the US, about an hour from Portland, in a eco-friendly plant that's a LEED Platinum level built plant. And we sell in 27,000 stores all over the world. And we only sell vegan products. We believe that the sustainability is for the future is most apparent in plant-based foods, and our job is to make them tasty and affordable for everybody in the world. And so I've been vegetarian actually since 1971. I'm 69 now and still here.
Thanks, Seth. I just wanted to, before we start, just again to discuss the overall science and where we are in the world in terms of trends in health. I mean, from a developed market standpoint, we are suffering from a poor diet. As I mentioned earlier, 40% of the world is overweight or obese. And all of this is directly linked to climate change. I mean, we're eating too much meat. 70+% of land is being used to grow crops for farming, for cattle, etc. And we're not consuming enough plants and healthier produce that's available across the markets being grown across the world. But kicking off, maybe Maya, you can shed some light on this, on really the trends in health across the developed markets. What are we facing in terms of the challenges in health and nutrition, and what can really be done to improve our overall well-being?
Yeah, I mean, there really is a quite big boom of the plant-based going on at the moment, and more people are really starting to see that actually, like, this could be something for me, and maybe I could just, do a little shift. At the same time, what we see is that many people are totally confused with the selection that is currently available, that you really are interested in these plant-based foods, and suddenly they're just full of all kinds of stuff that you really do not feel that you want to eat, to say, like, all kinds of strange items and things that you cannot even pronounce, and full of saturated fats, etc., etc. So this whole, like, a paradox between the clean label and then the plant-based, this is actually something that like is quite dominant in here, especially when we're thinking about that, like in the flexitarians like lifestyle, you do not only eat plant-based, just like, like on your Friday burger. You really want to also have things that are like a good when you're thinking about it, what the kids should be eating, what your family should be eating. So there I really see that, there's a big boom towards the plant-based, but at the same time, the offering is quite like confusing for many people, that what is really healthy, and does it really mean that it's healthy if it's plant-based? And yeah, there's still a lot to do for the whole overall category.
I would like to add to that. I mean, I agree with you. There is a lot of confusion in, I think, the definition of the health attributes of plant-based alternatives. You see a lot of the products on the market have, high sodium content and a lot of additional preservatives to make it tasty. Seth, having been in the market for so many years, what is behind, the issues when companies and individuals are saying, I don't really know what to eat in plant-based alternatives. Is it really healthy? And why should I be altering my diet? Excluding obviously the climate benefits, but why should I be changing my diet for a product that has so many different definitions and is really quite confusing to the average consumer?
Yeah, well, as Maya pointed out, there's a wide variety of plant-based foods available, certainly on the market. The meat alternatives is the space that we operate in, and we make every attempt to use the highest quality, simplest products. Like we do our R&D in aprons in a kitchen, not really, you know, a laboratory. There's in soy products, there's such a wide variety of products. We base everything on organic soy and traditionally based soy proteins such as tofu and tempeh, which is a fermented product from Indonesia. And I think that there's some kind of a misnomer that somehow the number of ingredients that you have in a product makes it either is the definition of this is healthy or not. We have just different beans, garbanzo beans, white beans. We have wheat protein, we have soy protein, but everything is made from traditional soy proteins that have proven themselves over centuries to be healthy and sustainable in Asia and different cultures all over the world. So that is our approach. But above all, you know, when in this space that we're in, we feel like taste is really what you're up against. And if the product, we say taste is king, value is queen, everything else is marketing. You really need to, you know, mimic the taste of meat that consumers are looking for. But we do it in a way, for instance, our deli slices are half the sodium of meat deli slices, sausage, less sodium, no fat, no cholesterol. Low fat, excuse me, and no cholesterol. So we make every effort to deliver taste and flavor and nutrition all in the same product. And that's really the focus on us. You know, we understand that there's whole food diets that are great, salads, kale, and man does not live by kale alone, at least in this country. So we're providing that protein and in a package that we feel is a sustainable protein and a very healthful ingredient string.
I would like to actually add to your statement, Seth, about, you know, value is queen, you know, taste is king. A lot of the plant-based alternatives or nutritional health or nutritional products derived from plants, you know, are quite costly in the supermarket. It's not on a price comparison when you compare to meats, which you can get, frankly, far too cheaply in Western supermarkets in particular. How, I mean, maybe this is for Ali, and also we can swing back to Maya. How can the alternative world compete on price when it's really actually, you know, not available to the masses from a Western point of view? And longer term, how can we use it to feed, you know, the poor and tackle the SDGs from it when the pricing point is quite high? And a lot of the companies that are there are not very profitable.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, please do, Ali. Anyone can jump in and ask each other questions.
I'll let the two actually doing products in this space speak for themselves shortly. But I guess, I mean, in our view, you're in a circular issue in the sense of, as you say, meat is too cheap. So how do you value different natural resources is what it comes down to. And we've cheapened and not put a cost on externalities that come from the meat system and don't have at scale the kind of plants that we would prefer to eat. It's a unit economics issue for both of them, as well as how do you prioritize the health of nature and put a value on that. And it's, I guess, the reason that we often talk about or do talk about is systemic investing. So we look to create systemic change in the food system, and that unless you change the levers of power that will allow us to shift from a quantity driven to a quality driven food system, you're sort of playing with the superficial layer. And I say that for the sake of if you had a sense of nutritional density, for example, how much nutrient are you getting for what you're consuming? And if you were to be able to discern health and put a financial value on that from foods, things like freshness, things like source, pesticides, chemicals that are in soil and then translate into food, you would all of a sudden see a different food system and a different way of costing it. and then of course putting a price on those foods. So it's hence the fundamental shift. You can't play with one piece of that and have the rest of it tip over. So I think part of it is just that plant-based foods are newer to the market and therefore don't have the economy of scale that we do with slaughtering of cows. If we can shift that, and I think that's what the founding members of the plant-based movement like Tofurky and otherwise have been able to do, pull and reflect consumer demand for a different food system and then be able to shift that balance. But we're at the beginning of that, and it is one that requires prioritizing quality over quantity.
I agree with that, quality over quantity, Ali, but
Yeah.
how can you mitigate that with a growing population where at the end of the day, people are always going to buy the product that is cheapest and that can feed their families? And, you know, education, I think, is a key aspect. We spent a lot of yesterday's sessions discussing the vital role of education for the general masses. But I agree with you. How can we get better quality products, A, in a growing world, and B, when they're more expensive?
I would add to that that I
Maybe I
don't
could say a
think
couple of
it's,
words for that as well.
yeah.
Please go on.
Oh, I would just add that in the United States, we don't feel as plant-based producers and members of the new and founding members of the Plant-Based Foods Association, which is trying to level the playing field between plant-based food producers and animal-based food producers. We feel like the subsidies, the true cost of meat is not included in the supermarket price that you see when you're seeing that it's, you know, ground beef is $1.79 or whatever a pound. That you know, we see the subsidies and the cost of the environmental cleanup problems and everything that are associated with meat really driving that price up if it were truly factored in. So the Plant-Based Foods Association, which now has over 150 member companies in the United States, is trying to level the playing field by you know, saying that these subsidies aren't really fair and we're not getting the same treatment and help, you know, in marketing our products, that as well as just the production and the cleanup and all the other things that are associated with that. So I think even at that level that we're at now, Tofurky, like deli slices, we're the same or cheaper than meat. So I think it's a little bit of a misnomer when you look at some of the high-end products like Beyond Meat. Burgers are, you know, $6.99 or something for 2 patties, very expensive. But those prices are going to come down, as Ali says, you know, once you reach the economies of scale, and we've reached some of that now, and we hope to do more in the future. So take away the subsidies and grow bigger and get the economies of scale, and we'll be there.
Patrick, I'm going to swing back to you with a specific question, but Maya, if you want to add to that, I see you nodding vigorously.
Yeah, I was just about to add that, you know, like it's really the topic. We also face this question quite often, that, you know, like, what is the reason why are you like more expensive than the actual meat? So is it like you don't know your business, or is it because you're so greedy, and like, what is the problem? But, you know, it's so funny because consumers, just like Said was saying, that the actual meat price is not included in the supermarket price. So that's exactly the point. You don't include the environmental cost, but at the same time, there's like a huge subsidies happening all the time in the meat industry. So there's like these are like decade-long systems that are built around the meat industries. I mean, and maybe it had a place one, you know, like earlier when people were suffering and there were like all kinds of nutritional problems. So yes, maybe there was a reason for that, but it's just not valid anymore today. So just even thinking about that, there are also like other values, you know, not just that, you know, like what's kilo price. For example, in our product, the pulled oats product, it has about 30% of protein. If you look at the basic ground beef, it's like 19%. So it's like sometimes you even should look at that, you know, like, what are you really getting for this price? So like, how many people can you actually feed with this one tray, and like, you know, how valid it's actually as a product. And sometimes we have been even seeing that, you know, there are sometimes there's like really great like a supermarket marketing individuals who are like seeing this differently. And for example, I'm targeting to different audience by saying like, look, here is like a 3 proteins. Here is the a kilo price of the protein. You know, that you can actually choose it even based on the protein price. And then in that comparison, quite often the plant-based is actually as good as what is the meat. But yeah, this is something that also the European Union is of course now putting like a lot of focus on, really like trying to unify this and eventually finally, well, it's going to take some years still, but to really get like the real prices available for the consumers.
Well, the issues around subsidies, I don't think is going anywhere, to be honest. And we have to look at that not only on a political but lobbying level. So that's for a different day, a different conversation, and maybe a different event. But I want to swing around to Patrick. I'm curious to know, as part of the Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisor, what are you advising your clients on in terms of health and nutrition? And what are the main noises coming out from your side and also from asset owners in terms of engagement and stewardship with their institutional investors, which is then also ultimately passed on to the portfolio companies? So good to get your views on that, and then we can swing that back to Ali.
Absolutely. What I can do is focus on the role of the investor and the role of the investor and how it connects to this space. Interestingly, the market for values aligned investing, impact investing, however you want to call it, has really had a huge upshot over the last 10 years. By some measures, it's doubled over the last 5 years, from $8 trillion to $16 trillion in the United States. That's definitely the broadest market size that's available. And the question is, why does that happen? A couple things. One thing is the increased role of women and the next generation in investment decisions. And the second is just the market opportunity. Again, a US focused number, but in the US alone, $400 billion are given away in philanthropy. The government budget is roughly 4 trillion, so 10 times that. And then even more, 10 times that, about 70 trillion is the size of capital markets. So the idea is, if you can shift that huge number, even just a little bit, towards the values you care about, you can make a big difference. Frankly, you could fill the gap of the UN SDGs if there were investable opportunities. So as we help asset owners navigate this question specific to food, it's been interesting approaches that they'll take, and I'll just name a few. But in terms of the market, it's actually at least from the Global Impact Investing Network, the market has doubled also in the last 5 years, the allocation to food and agriculture for impact investors. So that's something to watch. There's more and more activity here. But ways you can do that. Obviously, consumer demand is a huge driver here. But other things that are happening is that there's innovation that's being seeded. So even from charitable vehicles, making investments in things like Beyond Meat, and seeing those graduate and go and IPO in more of a charitable investment from that standpoint, because of the impact nature of that product and that company. Another is just pure investor demand. So when a retail investor goes to their advisor at a big bank and they say, I care about this issue, can you help me find a product that aligns to it? That makes big banks listen and shift their assets. And then finally, a little more high engagement approach, but is shareholder engagement. So taking ownership of a big food business and saying, I want to not just choose something that aligns to my values, but take ownership in something that has a broad market cap and try to shift the big ship, if you will, through engaging the company. And a lot of interesting organizations, As You Sow is the one that comes up almost every time, that will aggregate shareholders to make, to vote proxies and to make amendments to core business practices. So a lot of different approaches to be able to engage this issue.
Thanks, Patrick. Swinging that round to Ali, in terms of, as we see from a European market, asset owners are now requiring portfolio allocation to have a certain level dedicated towards impact. You're the expert in this field. But in terms of the market opportunity, Where are you seeing the trends in the market, and where are we on a broader global level?
Sure, I'll partially answer that. I can't answer the global piece. I do think Europe is leading in that, so far as it really reflects the European perspective in the sense of sustainability. Environmental concerns have always been high on the agenda here, and you've got a European Commission that is definitely supportive of that. The Farm to Fork strategy has put a lot of useful legislation forward that pertains to removing chemicals, which then creates opportunity for different practices that are chemical obsolete, and give agriculture a nudge, certainly, which is the one we care about most. I think what's interesting in terms of the transition is arguably, as Patrick was mentioning, a lot of the big companies have been nudged by negative screens in impact. So ESG reforming companies into more positive behavior. What's really interesting for us, and our fund is certainly indicative of it, we've allocated 300 million US to positive screens, which is proactively targeting positive change in the food system and looking for technological IP that can enable those opportunities at scale. And the transformation, I think, that we've seen in the past 3 to 5 years, I mean, 5 years ago, when I started in this space, the concept or the term agri-food tech was certainly not a term, or a minimum nothing that anyone I spoke to ever had any concept of, and kept me in a deeply nerdy niche, which was fine. But now I think that terminology is much more normal and common. There are a lot of funds in our space. There are a lot of co-investors with similar ideologies, not the same, but many more people focused on this. And the concept of positive screens and developing a specific market thesis and investment thesis against positive changes that can happen in specific sectors that you know best as market experts or sector experts, and going after those as investors, I think that's quite new, and has been great to be part of.
Maya, in terms of the technology and the technical IP, I mean, Golden Green Foods clearly have that within their product. I mean, what really differentiates your product and is innovative from that side compared to, you know, the alternatives on the market?
Yeah, like I said, you know, yeah, we have quite nice and significant patent portfolio already. But of course, it's about like how are you using these innovations and the technology. Just because nobody can really eat the tech, you really have to create something valuable based on the tech. In our case, really, the whole thing has been to try to solve this puzzle that, like I said in the beginning, from the very like fake meat based meat alternatives into something that is actually clean label, actually good for you. And I like really trying to think about that, like how could you actually make the ingredients work for you and really like work with the nature, not try to kind of like artificially and synthetically kind of like simulate something, but to really think about that, what could be the nature's way if it just help it a little bit. So in a way, like I'm really excited about this tech of this new generation, that it is not so much happening only in the lab, but it's actually like how do we treat something so carefully and like so gently that you really do not need all of these like super hard and harsh processes and like a chemical treatments, etc. So just with some gentle treatment, you can actually create meat from oats, which is something that nobody was thinking before. So yeah, this is really like our key point, and our aim really is to try to make it as easy as possible for people to switch to plant-based by offering more alternatives and like a better, healthier products.
I mean, Seth, we can clearly say that, you know, Tofurky is a healthier alternative, and you've been on the growth path since 1980, I believe, in Tofurky, and really you've been a pioneer for the sector. Well, how did that come about from your point of view? What was the shift in your attitude to make you think, right, this is no longer sustainable? And this is 40 years ago. So from then to now, where are we?
Yeah, you know, the original reason for me to become vegetarian was reading the book Diet for a Small Planet from Frances Moore Lappé, which has sold millions and millions of copies, and now is in its 50th year of existence, and they're updating that book now. But that was the first book that really pointed out the unsustainability of and inefficiency of animal meat food, whereas you had this crazy system where you take 16 up to 16 pounds of grains and you funnel them through an animal and you get a very poor return of 1 pound of protein or something like that, as opposed to feeding them directly, these grains directly to people. And that basic, this was 1971 when she wrote that book, and it's something that is still resonating today and is one of the most important tenets of why we are in existence. We think that plant-based foods are inherently more efficient than animal based foods. And if you can deliver value and taste using this paradigm, then that's a win-win-win. So I think that that's really what's driving us is, every time you've seen in the world efficiency in producing something, whether it's the printing press or it's whale oil or cars coming around, that there's more efficient ways of doing something. It's a winning proposition, and that as we scale up and look at from 7 billion people to 9 billion people and more on this planet, we really need to think of what are the most efficient systems. The animal-based system is only alive today because we have this vision of the planet as being, no big deal. We've got all these resources and we can afford this inefficient system. But as we look at now expanding, say, to Mars, if we colonize Mars, we're not going to be bringing cows and sheep up there. That's going to be a vegan planet. Why? Because it's a very limited production area of food for that. So it was really the efficiency and that the basic truths that Frances Moore Lappé stated in 1971 are still with us. And so we just have to, in order to meet the Paris 1.5 Celsius degrees that we're trying to not hit in the warming, in order to hit these numbers and to sustain life on the planet, I feel like the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to create more efficient systems and more sustainable systems, because what we have now is not a sustainable system.
Never have words that have been said 50 years ago more relevant than they are now. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure we all agree that the key of this is education on plant-based. Cliff Johnson yesterday in one of our sessions argued, when consumers are told to eat more protein, they're told to eat more meat. Well, what does the meat, the cow, eat? They eat plants, which are the source of the protein. So, I mean, this basic level, if you told most people, could significantly shift consumer behavior. And this brings me back to Patrick. I want to know, in terms of education on a plant-based level, long-term change is required now, and consumers are really going to be the driving force behind the change, really choosing with their wallets. But as we know, these shifts take time, but we need these drastic actions to be done now and implemented now. So what can be done to increase our educative level across the world and to get more people involved on the debate?
Sure. Well, you can start with me. I wasn't aware of that point you just made, Seth, and the one you just made as well. So I think that education, my wife has committed to being vegan as of 2 weeks ago. So I'm right on the learning journey, and plenty of documentaries out there that shed light on the influence of corporations, even in our healthcare, the healthcare side of it. So I think one piece of education that's critical and again, I'll apply this to all of this impact investing approaches, is the difference between a social enterprise where the value proposition and the impact are tied together, the difference between that and corporate philanthropy. And I think this is a really important distinction. It may look the same on an annual report for a company, no matter the size, but it's for investors to look at, is the mission that you care about integrated into the value proposition? So when a company scales financially, it will also scale in its impact. The corporate philanthropy is much more make your money on one side and then give money away, even if it's really for good purposes. It's not necessarily embedded in the company. So I think that's critical here. One example of that, I think it's really interesting, is the sort of chain centered on Ben and Jerry's. You've got a company like Greyston Bakery, which is a social business, hiring formerly incarcerated people, making the brownies for Ben and Jerry's, who is making, delicious dessert, then gets acquired by Unilever, who has one of the leading, large organizations doing this. It's a great example. And then you say, but centered on this is, dairy-based ice cream with tons of sugar. It's like, ugh. So you have to make decisions one step at a time. I don't know if folks have seen this, but I just read this. Unilever has just set a $1 billion target for plant-based food alternatives called a future foods strategy. So again, there's tons of activity here. The key question is, where does the asset owner want to play, and to start small? Because we see it overwhelming people all the time to say, I can't get involved in this. You have to be an expert. You have to commit your whole portfolio. No, you just start with your area of strength and then move forward. Another way of education is focusing on, where does nutrition or sustainable foods play a role in other issues? So we often have asset owners come to us and say, we care about education and we want to get involved in ed tech with our venture capital portfolio. And we say, that's great. That market is actually, there's plenty of capital there. Have you ever considered innovation through food technology, or at least focusing on the food angle of education? Because lack of nutrition is a huge barrier to good education with those with the lowest income. So a company like Revolution Foods, which has been backed by a lot of impact investments to provide healthy foods to low-income students and combat the nutrition angle to a broader issue.
I couldn't agree more. That was really well said. A nice end to that subject, Patrick. I'm going to take a question from the audience before we move on. Feel free, anyone, to jump in here. Maya, maybe you can start off. The question is, do you think that the world will move to a plant-based diet without regulation that penalizes the animal-based food producers? I said I wouldn't talk about something so political, but why not?
Yeah, it's a heavy question, definitely. But I just think that, honestly, just during the past couple of years, so much has happened. It's totally amazing. If you just look at, just say 5 past years, suddenly it's like every relevant meat company is actually doing plant-based already. If you just think about it, it's like something like that couldn't come to questions a few years ago, but now they just have to. Each and every meat company has to have a plant-based brunch. And if okay, now there are no cocktail parties because of the COVID, but without that, in every cocktail party, you have to also offer some sort of a vegan food, because otherwise you would look like you're a little bit old-fashioned and, somehow untrendy or something like that. And, just these small examples, what just happened in Finland was that in Helsinki University, it's the biggest university in the country, they actually skipped totally serving beef, first of all. And then they also totally skipped serving milk, like a cow's milk. So they switched actually totally to the oat-based drink. And they, some people were asking, why are you doing this? And why do you have to be so radical and so on? But they just said that, no, we're not being radical at all. It's just that our customers, our students just don't want this anymore. That, nobody's eating it anyways. So there's no reason to serve it. So these small signals, when you start counting them, actually, to be honest, maybe we can actually like just to take so big leap forward that it actually has to happen then, and that the political solutions will only follow this just organic development. So I'm actually having like quite high hopes towards the market position.
I want to ask a follow-up. Maybe Seth, you can tackle this. The shift towards a plant-based industry is obviously the way forward, but especially if you look in the United States, the unions and lobbyists around meat are substantial and across the world. Let's not just put it in one continent. What do you say to those that, although you're investing in terms of Ali's case in good products and things that are supporting SDGs on a social level, by investing in these areas, you're taking away jobs and value from other areas, and which are on a downward trend and currently already heavily subsidized?
Yeah, well, Tofurky doesn't make itself, so there's plenty of jobs in the new economy. I think that if you look at the next 50 or 100 years, I think that there's probably 50% of the jobs that will be around haven't even been invented yet. So I don't worry too much about jobs, but to Maya's point, I do want to add an exclamation point to that, I do think that we're headed to by necessity, to a plant-based world, and will meat totally disappear in 100 years? I don't think so. But I think once the consumer demand hits a level of 50, we attain a market share of 50%, then the politics start tipping in our favor. Meat companies only get subsidies because they are a big share of the market right now, and they've been very effective at marketing their products. And I think, though, that what we will eventually see is that meat will be kind of a special occasion thing. I think that it won't be the dominant paradigm that it is right now. And to the questioner's point, I think a meat tax is totally appropriate, given we're giving them, everything's backwards. We're giving them subsidies for doing what they're doing when they should actually be paying more. So I think a meat tax is very fair, and I think that plant-based, and we should also throw in there cellular clean meat products. That's going to tip the equation even more. You look at efficiency. I think it's like 6 weeks now to grow a chicken in these factory farms to slaughter weight, and it's like 6 days to brew cellular meat in a laboratory environment. So once again, efficiency. As these efficiencies scale, I think price goes down, and I think we're headed towards this world where, as the questioner said, the plant-based foods just organically on themselves are going to be the new paradigm.
I agree with you, particularly about cellular. That's called cellular protein, which is rapidly enhancing, and economies of scale will be achieved in these areas soon. The current barrier to entry, there is the cost, but I'm sure, as you said, that will drop down fairly quickly. I'd like to move on now and discuss everyone's favorite topic, which is COVID. And starting with Ali, I want to know really your views on how COVID has altered our diet and nutrition health across Europe and North America, and also from an investment standpoint. What new areas are you seeing coming onto your in-tray as a result?
This is a favorite question always now. And the same answer goes since the beginning of the pandemic, which is I think it's only magnified the areas that we focused on and the subsegments or big thematics, global changes that are our reason for being and our investment thesis. If anything, it's put more of a focus on where do you get your food? How does climate relate to that? You're only as good as the climate you keep. And in fact, we are kept by the climate. Our health at minimum is, and everything that relates to comes from the earth and the air. And that is intrinsic to who we are. So I think it magnifies people being focused on that and looking for sources of food that are related to their own personal health, being more connected to how it's grown. You've seen massive uptick in farm to table products or technologies. Online platforms that do that have been sold out through COVID. Local foods become much more of a priority. The concept of immunity boosting or microbiome focused foods is of course more important than ever. But I think we're also at that transition point where at the beginning of the sort of plant-based conversation, there was the concept of plant equals better than meat, and massive stigmatization of animal-based products. And now we've reached that time, as per Seth's point around, the number of ingredients was the point of interrogation with Impossible. 38 ingredients must be terrible. And arguably there are a lot of challenges on that ingredient list, and all of those companies will say we're in the process of reformulating. That was the first product. It was a matter of getting mainstream acquisition and getting customer adoption, which they did, and went via the delicious route, which I believe was king and value was queen. To some extent on Seth's point, but we're now at the transition point where nutrition and health matters slightly more, as well as source. And the conversation we often have is monoculture soy better than regeneratively farmed cattle? Arguably not. Depends what you mean by better, obviously. Which metrics are you using? Are you including both human health and environmental? How do you quantify the value of regeneratively raised cattle? That would need to include things like soil fertility as well as human health. Anyway, suffice to say, I think what it's usefully done is created more transparency to the issues that we aim to target and enable solutions for, and also catalyze things like government policy to be more positively focused on this and consumer interest. You've just seen an acceleration for most of the companies in this market, which is great.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, same question to you, Maya. I mean, in terms of adding to that regarding COVID and the subsequent results from it in terms of health and nutrition.
Yeah, actually, like in Finland market, you could see in the beginning of the pandemics that people were maybe kind of like taking one step back towards where they were, like, kind of like squirreling different foods, like thinking about that you're going to just be locked in your home. Nobody knew where is it going to be. So actually, like, you could see some little increase on the meat consumption in the very early days of the pandemics. But then when the situation has been kind of like, now it's more like the new normal. So you really already start seeing that, wait a minute, your health is really like based on what you're eating, and there's been like a lot of communication about that, like the better you eat, the healthier you are, and kind of like the better you are prepared for the possible illness and so on. So this is really kind of like it's like a then flipping upside down, that suddenly people are like looking much more into the plant-based food. And in some markets like USA, I'm sure everybody has been reading this news that, like the slaughterhouses, lockdowns and all of those. It's like, there's a quite alarming that people are really starting to see that there is something wrong in there. And, like, oh, do I want to be part of that? I heard, I think some of the most radical ones were like, COVID, the actual virus was found inside of a chicken, like a packed chicken. That is like, wait a minute, I do not want to be eating that. So I think that, in bigger scale, it is actually going to be helpful for the plant-based category development.
I mean, Seth, I'm sure you can add to that in terms of, obviously COVID has had some disastrous, health statistics and obviously disastrous economic statistics, but from a Tofurky point of view, I'm sure the supply chain has not been interrupted. I mean, Maya mentioned, cattle obviously being in lockdown, having to be slaughtered. We've seen it spread rapidly in animals, in mink in Scandinavia. There's another example there where animals, are not immune to pandemics. But from what we've seen so far, plants are immune to the coronavirus. So how has Tofurky really dealt with this? I'm sure you've had a lot more orders coming into your in-tray. And how has that been from a Tofurky point of view? Have you seen a greater uptick in demand?
Yeah, we have had an uptick in demand for sure. And in the early days of the COVID in March and April, there was actually shortages of meat because of all the, disrespect that these meat plants were doing to their employees. So there was massive COVID outbreaks in these meat plants that didn't do any, social distancing. So it was like a big customer demo for us. Like people were just going, well, I can't find this meat product, so I'll try this plant-based foods product. So, there was panic buying at first, but now it's kind of leveled off a little bit, but we're at a point where we're definitely up. We're 20 or 30%, depending on the product line, up from year over year. But, to the point about COVID, I think that, 3/4 of the viruses that we've seen come out in the last 10 or 20 years have been zoonotic and come from animals. And there's this concept of that we need wild habitat in order to serve as a buffer to these horrible viruses and diseases that are found throughout the animal kingdom. And as we eat into that buffer, we increase our chance of more viruses coming out. So once again, with this inefficient system that's gobbling up more and more acres in the Amazon of wildlife buffer areas, it just makes total sense that we need an efficient system. So we need to protect the buffer, protect wildlife habitat, and create a sustainable food system that doesn't put us at such tremendous risk. And if you really want to have a nightmare and not sleep tonight, Google, animal resistance in these factory farms to antibiotics and what that kind of potential for more diseases are. So plant-based foods, once again, can serve as a nutritious and delicious alternative that reduces greatly zoonotic diseases from animals occurring. So it's been quite a challenge over here, but we're rising to the challenge and have kept everybody healthy.
Thanks for that, Seth. I now look forward to not sleeping tonight. I'm wary of the time, so I'm going to round off by asking posing some questions rather from the audience. We've got quite a number coming in. I'm going to start with one. Maybe Ali, you can kick us off, and then I've got a couple for Patrick, which are quite specific. So, recent surveys done in countries such as China indicate that demand for meat alternatives are only likely to increase if alternatives are cheaper than meat. When will alternatives become cheaper than regular meat? And we've touched on that previously in terms of heavily subsidized, but I mean, what a time frame you're looking at and your views there?
My crystal ball is unfortunately missing today. So I can't give you a verbatim for that one. I mean, there's a spectrum, right? If you ask the startups in this space, including the clean meat startups, everyone will say in market 2 to 5 years. And of course, bringing down costs, et cetera. That's the storyline that, of course, is useful when you're raising and reflects the needs of VC investors and timelines for funds. In reality, I think there's a combination, right? I mean, it's the combination of regulation as well. Somewhere like Singapore has put a goal of 30 by 30, 30% food security by 2030. That will usher in a generation of new technology that will enable a more food secure nation and enable more local production. I think localized production and distributed production is part of that. When will we come to price parity? I think it's a combination of, as Maya was saying before, and Seth, consumer demand is demonstrative of what this market wants, and that's what investors follow. We follow the sound in the market. We follow the logic of consumers to say there is an acquisitive market here that wants products of this nature, therefore we will back them and accelerate that backing. Equally, you're seeing regulation say, we cannot have these kind of externalities in the market. We have climate change is a alive and well problem. Food security is an alive and well problem. We have to create punitive measures to tip that balance. And as both things are happening at the same time, we're at that useful tipping point. I think there are two ways of answering that. One is we have to do this within the next 2 to 5 years. We do not have that option. when you look at all of the things Seth mentioned and any number of other things that will give you a sleepless night. And the reason that so many backers, whether it be Unilever or Microsoft, who has a whole carbon commitment that relates particularly to agriculture, forestry, or the utility of trees and sequestering carbon, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of market signals that say this will happen soon. But I think the combination is less when will it happen, but when will it happen in a way that gives us nutrition and environmental practices that enable long-term sustainability, instead of marketing that creates stigma in certain places, like against animals and for plants, but may or may not be actually evidenced by the practices behind the products. So I think that's what we hope for, of more transparency in the system and that system accelerating.
Patra, anything to add on that?
Not necessarily on that. I'm actually still reeling from Seth's comment on COVID being essentially generated from animals in our food system, and I'm frankly am sort of taken aback, because I was so personally hit by COVID with a baby being born in the middle of the spring in New York City, that I just think we have a unique opportunity right now for education, because this is an issue that, I mean, COVID hit every home in the center of it. There's no one who is not aware of it, who hasn't been affected by it. And so just a comment there to say this is a unique moment to talk to folks about the importance, both from sort of centered on COVID and even the more recent racial equity question, that so many more investors are getting involved, a lot of more money committed, more of the portfolio being shifted, because people are saying these issues are no longer somewhere off in, someone else's plate, or the kind of questionable climate, who knows what's what, but actually this hit my house. And so leveraging that to try to make a difference. And of course, for us, it's the investor's perspective and helping them shift dynamics at the corporate level.
I would like to end with a closing remark from each panelist. We've got just 2 minutes, so if we can, 30 seconds each. What closing statements do you have for us and the audience, or who are watching and understanding further about the health and nutrition and the sustainability benefits for us? One word to help describe the future.
Yeah, maybe I could just say my greetings for everybody who is watching. So it's really, it's up to all of us that what is the future going to be like. So there's like so many ways to contribute to this industry that, like change is really into people. It's so nicely said by our former president, Martti Ahtisaari, who said that what people have started, people can fix. So we are here now to fix these problems. And, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're working somewhere else in the whole chain, there's always a way to really have a really great impact. So we're actually quite privileged to be in the position that we can actually do a big change.
Seth, your 30 seconds of closing, please.
Well, yeah, we've created a cruel and inefficient system of raising protein, and we just need to eat less in order to hit the environmental targets that we're needing to hit. We need to reduce meat consumption by, I think, up to 90%. So however we can do it, whether it's with meat alternatives that are healthy, or salads and just whole plant foods, we need to attack it from all areas. And our very survival on the planet depends on us making this paradigm shift away from this inefficient system into a healthy plant-based system. So eat less meat.
Ali?
Hold on.
There you go.
So many technical challenges. I won't end on that. I think Maya and Seth have put it even better than I would, but I think that the best thing we can all do is understand that you can vote with your buying habits. Understand your food system, look at labels, look at where you buy food from, understand that at greater depth, And if it doesn't petrify you into change, brilliant. But if it does, buy something different. And ideally, there are more options to do that. And if there aren't, let me know. I'm sure there is. I'd happy to talk about it. And likewise, if you're an entrepreneur doing something to create systemic change and you have technical IP and you share the virtues of a regenerative planet, do let me know.
Great. And Pat, last but not least, 20 seconds, I'm afraid.
So first, a personal commitment. I eat meat twice or 3 times a day. So after this, I'm going to try to go down to once. So thank you for the inspiration. The charge is really a broader one to say that all assets have impact. So no matter what you own and what portfolio, those companies are out in the world doing things. They have supply chains and corporate diversity and products and services that are doing things in the world. So get to know what your portfolio is up to and try to shift it towards the net positive.
Thanks, Pat. Well said to end that off. I'd like to thank our panelists for a really riveting session. I think we could have gone on for a lot longer, but if anyone wants to connect with them, please do so via Swapcard. I'm sure they'll be happy to connect. Thank you all once again, and virtual round of applause, and enjoy the rest of the conference, and see you all soon.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, guys.